really should start by apologising for my shaggier than normal appearance and for the terrible sound of my voice. Unfortunately, I'm very ill this week and I'm really not feeling awfully bright. But this is the most exciting car to come out of Peugeot for 29 years, so it's got to be worth a little bit of suffering.
The 80s were outstanding for many reasons, and even those of us who were still at school adored the cars. You can argue about whether 80s music was good or bad, whether the era spawned the greatest films, or whether permed hair should ever be allowed near civilized society again. But everyone agrees on one thing. The decade was the age of the GTI. All these cars were so absurdly addictive precisely because they had no power steering or electronic safety aids, and because they possessed engines that would proudly give environmentalists the finger as they shook their window frames. Most of all, they were cars that took real skill to drive. You either got good at driving 80s hot hatches fast, or spent an awful lot of time in hedges. So, it's not just Peugeot that has difficulty in recreating the hot hatch experience. Many manufacturers have tried and failed over the years. But this time, Peugeot is confident. So confident that the 208 GTI is being hailed as the greatest hot hatch since the 205. Well, it can't be any worse than the 207 variant, that's for sure. Of course, it'll take a proper test to see how much better it really is, but at first glance, it certainly looks the part. At face value, the 208 GTI is the very automotive definition of the term retro. 80s cool with a modern twist. So it looks good, but faced with the insurmountable hurdles of safety and emissions red tape, could Peugeot get anywhere near recreating the driving experience?
Now, to really put this car to the test, we're going to steer clear of tracks with perfectly flat surfaces and opt for the old school, real world sort of road surface. Now, the problem is that we can't exactly go encouraging you to drive like a lunatic on public roads. So what we need is a private road on a private estate. I mean, there are some very nice stately homes around with massive estates attached. They might send me somewhere nice, with sheep and things.
At this point, programs like Top Gear or Fifth Gear would whisk the entire shoot off to somewhere really exotic and throw oodles of cash at it to prove the point. But we're working with a more modest budget. So after much thought, the producers eventually decided that the perfect place to get back to basics was here. Yeah, I'm being sent to the poop factory. An odd place for a car test, you may think. But what many of these plants have is miles and miles of perimeter roads, well away from all the stinky stuff, and perfect GTI territory.
Okay, so a sewage plant wasn't exactly what I had in mind, and if you muck it up on one of these corners, well, I mean, you could literally end up in the poo. But let's face it, it's open roads, no speed limits, and a GTI!
As soon as you slam your foot flat to that suitably thin carpet, you hear a noise that instantly makes you glad to be on the open road. It doesn't have the snorting grunt of its forefathers, but the sound does have a very nice, unsophisticated clarity to it. It's addictive.
Whoa! Whoa, we were airborne on that one!
It's smooth too and raring to go all the way around the clock. The red line's at 6,200 RPM, but it pulls hard right to the very end, so you get to know that limiter pretty well.
actually that much power in real terms, but it certainly makes up for it with enthusiasm. It's feisty yet well behaved at low revs. Subtle, that's the word, subtle. It's like a little terrier dog, this thing. Good with people, usually calm, until it sees another terrier or another hot hatch and then whoosh, through your legs up the garden path and gone. Revs over 3,500 RPM and there it goes. Brrr, brrr. Well, that one was a bit close. I think we almost ended up in a poop pile then.
The 208's overhangs are obviously short and the steering is perfectly weighted, so this little beastie scampers neatly into bends, the front tyres scrabbling for grip all the way. Unlike its great-great-great-grandfather though, there's equal grip from the back end too, so you corner with surprising stability. Yeah, first big mistake.
In an old GTI, you'd have come into a corner hard with no power on and the light back end would have just stepped out a little bit. But of course this is far heavier and far more sensible. In fact, Peugeot appears to have taken a more mature attitude towards the 208 GTI and gone down the Golf route in many ways. Which is quite interesting, because a Golf GTI with this level of kit on board would set you back a whopping £6,000 more.
And there's more good news. It's well calibrated to ensure that you don't rattle your teeth out over potholes or uneven B roads, and the suspension is pretty quiet, which has historically been a big problem for small Peugeots. It's even got a decent sound system, even if it is so fiddly to use that you have to pull over every time you want to operate it.
The gear shift is really good. It's slightly notchy like a proper GTI and pretty precise.
In fact, the powertrain as a whole is highly effective, if not exhilarating at times. The brakes are strong and stable too once you get used to the weighting of the pedal.
There's a little bit of body roll, but there's grip in spades, even when you turn the electronics off.
Overall, it feels far more exciting than perhaps it is. You get the impression that you're driving on the edge at times, even if you're not really pushing the boundaries, and it makes you look good, that's for sure. It's young, it's racy, and its retro cabin sets it apart from the crowd with touches like the leather-stitched dashboard and those awesome 80s checkered seats.
But not only do they look good, they hold you in place really well when things get windy. And they're actually 10mm lower than the seats in a standard 208. I personally think they could have lowered them even further though, because let's face it, the purpose of a GTI is to make you feel like you're sitting on the boards and flying by the seat of your pants.
So having woken myself up with a bit of good old-fashioned idiocy, I decided to pull over and to tell you all about the car's performance. But I was feeling worse than ever, and as I pulled over, my voice finally gave out. My head hurt, my eyes hurt, and we'd now entered the realm of silent movies. If I was going to tell anyone about this car's stats, it was going to have to be done the old-fashioned way. The very old-fashioned way. and then I had to go and sit down. But after several cups of tea and an hour of resting my voice, I was able to muster the energy to deliver my final verdict. After all, even in the depths of illness, this car had been a real joy to drive.
Ooh, feisty! With its 1.6-litre turbocharged engine, the GTI certainly isn't terrifying raw power. It is, however, a tremendous amount of fun. And after a day of travelling at ludicrous speeds around tight, unrestricted roads, I can honestly say that although this car may not have made me feel like I needed a change of pants, it certainly made me feel like I was flying by them. And that is what a GTI is all about.
So here's the question that everyone wants the answer to. Is it the 205 GTI Reborn? Well, no. Because unless you can scrap all the regulations that tie manufacturers' hands behind their backs, making cars purely because they're fun to drive will never happen again. So, the only appropriate question is whether it's the best GTI that Peugeot could have made for today's market. And the answer to that is a categoric yes.